What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected, level-headed actors walks into what should have been a simple, routine morning talk show appearance, only to realize within minutes that he stepped straight into an ambush? What unfolds next is the kind of moment that starts as a spark but ends as a wildfire, spreading across social media, dominating headlines, and leaving fans and critics arguing for days. What you're about to hear is the full story behind the explosive confrontation that ended with Matt Damon abruptly standing up, removing his mic, and storming off the View stage, while Joy Behar scrambled live on air to justify a question that crossed a line many viewers believed should never have been crossed. This wasn't your typical celebrity interview meltdown. This wasn't a misunderstanding, a slip of the tongue, or a tense moment that got exaggerated online. This was something much bigger, a masterclass in how a personal agenda, when mixed with a powerful platform and a provocative host, can destroy professional credibility in a matter of minutes. So yes, make sure to tap that subscribe button and drop your thoughts in the comments, because trust me, after hearing what really happened, you will have opinions. Matt Damon had agreed to appear on The View to promote his latest environmental documentary, passion project deeply rooted in years of research, travel, collaboration with scientists, and personal commitment. It wasn't just another film for him. This was something he had poured 3 years of his life into, sacrificing time with his family, funding parts of the project himself, and pushing for the kind of global conversations most people avoid because of how complicated, emotional, and political they can become. As he walked onto the brightly lit set and settled into the familiar semicircle desk, everything seemed normal. The audience cheered, the hosts smiled, the cameras rolled smoothly into position. Matt relaxed, adjusting his jacket and setting down the mug of water placed in front of him. He had been on this show many times before. He knew the format, knew the rhythm, and knew how to navigate the lively discussions the show was known for. He expected curiosity. He expected debate. He expected the usual mix of seriousness and daytime television energy. But what he did not expect was the tone Joy Behar took the moment the conversation began shifting toward his documentary. Instead of asking about the message behind the film or the challenges of filming across multiple countries, she pivoted sharply, almost aggressively, into a line of questioning that felt less like journalism and more like an attempt to corner him into a viral sound bite. Her voice took on a sharper edge. Her expression shifted from friendly host to someone ready to challenge, provoke, and push until something snapped. Producers sensed it. The audience felt it. Even the other hosts exchanged quick, uneasy glances. Matt tried at first to answer with patience. He clarified misconceptions. He redirected. He even attempted humor to diffuse the tension. But Joy kept pushing, interrupting, reframing his words, twisting the conversation into something entirely different from why he was there. She wasn't interested in the film. She wasn't interested in the years of work behind it. She wasn't even interested in the environmental issues the documentary highlighted. She was interested in him, or more specifically, in cornering him with a loaded question that had nothing to do with his project. A question so pointed, so off-topic, and so clearly designed to stir controversy that the audience actually gasped when she said it. Matt Damon froze, not dramatically, not theatrically, but with a kind of stunned disbelief that even he couldn't hide. For a split second, the usually controlled media-savvy actor looked genuinely blindsided. The kind of blindsided that makes someone lean back, draw in a slow breath, and reassess everything about the moment they are in. He tried to respond respectfully. He tried to steer the conversation back to the documentary. But Joy interrupted him again, and again, and again, each time more forceful than the last. Something changed in his expression. His patience drained. The warmth left his voice. The smile faded completely. Then came the moment. Matt placed both hands on the desk, leaned forward slightly, and said, calmly but firmly, the words that instantly silenced the entire studio. I came here to talk about something important, something I've worked on for years. But if this is the direction you want to take, then I think I'm done. Joy tried to salvage it. She laughed nervously, tried to rephrase her question, tried to spin the situation as harmless, but the audience wasn't buying it. Neither was he. Matt reached down, unclipped his microphone, set it neatly on the table, and stood up. The camera crew scrambled, unsure whether to cut to commercial or keep rolling. The co-hosts looked shocked. Joy tried to stop him, but he simply shook his head, said, "Have a good day," and walked off the set with the calm authority of a man who had just decided his dignity mattered more than any interview. The entire studio was stunned. The viewers at home were stunned. And Joy Behar, left alone at the desk, fumbling for words, was forced to explain an on-air meltdown she had single-handedly triggered. This wasn't a moment people forgot. It was a moment that proved yet again that when personal agendas collide with professional responsibilities, the fallout can be immediate, public, and irreversible. What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected, thoughtful, and remarkably level-headed actors walks into what should have been a simple, friendly, routine morning talk show appearance, only to realize within minutes that he stepped directly into an ambush disguised as an interview? What follows is the kind of moment that begins as a quiet spark, but quickly erupts into a wildfire, one that spreads across social media platforms, dominates entertainment headlines, and leaves fans and critics fiercely debating what really happened. What you're about to hear is the full, unfiltered story behind the explosive confrontation that ended with Matt Damon abruptly standing up, removing his mic, and storming off the View stage, while Joy Behar struggled live on air to explain a question that many viewers believed crossed a line that should never have been crossed. This wasn't a typical celebrity interview meltdown. It wasn't the result of a minor misunderstanding, a misinterpreted phrase, or a moment of accidental tension blown out of proportion. This was something far bigger, far more calculated, a real-time demonstration of how personal agendas, when combined with a highly visible platform and a host determined to generate headlines, can destroy professional credibility in a matter of minutes. So yes, be sure to hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments, because after hearing what really unfolded on that stage, you're definitely going to have something to say. Matt Damon had agreed to appear on The View to promote his latest environmental documentary, a project rooted in years of research, global travel, collaboration with scientists and activists, and deeply personal commitment. This wasn't just another film release for him. It was something he had poured more than 3 years of his life into, sacrificing time with his family, investing his own money, and pushing for global discussions that most people shy away from because of how complex, emotional, and politically charged the topics can be. For Damon, this documentary wasn't just work, it was a mission. As he stepped onto the brightly lit stage, everything felt familiar. The audience cheered warmly, the host smiled widely, the cameras glided effortlessly across the set. Matt adjusted his jacket and rested his hands on the curved desk, settling into the comfort of a show he had visited many times before. He expected tough questions, he expected lively debate, and he expected the usual mix of seriousness and daytime TV charm. What he did not expect was the sudden shift in atmosphere, the moment Joy Behar opened her mouth. Rather than asking about the film's message, the challenges of shooting in multiple countries, or the environmental issues at the heart of his project, Joy swerved sharply, almost aggressively, into a line of questioning designed not to spark discussion, but to corner him. Her tone sharpened, her expression changed from friendly host to interrogator, and her words carried the unmistakable edge of someone trying to provoke, unsettle, and push her guest into a reaction that would go viral. People noticed immediately. The producers stiffened behind the cameras. The audience's murmurs died into uneasy silence. Even the hosts usually eager to jump into heated conversations, looked caught off guard. Something was off, and everyone felt it. Matt, always composed and thoughtful, tried to navigate the shift with patience. He clarified points. He corrected misconceptions. He tried to redirect the conversation toward the documentary. He even offered light jokes to ease the tension, but Joy refused to let it go. She interrupted him repeatedly. She reframed his answers. She twisted the conversation into something that had nothing to do with why he was there. She wasn't interested in the film. She wasn't interested in the environmental crisis it highlighted. She wasn't even interested in the years of effort Matt had committed to the project. She was interested in him, or more specifically, in attacking him with a loaded question that had nothing to do with his work. A question so inflammatory, so unrelated, and so obviously engineered for controversy that the audience audibly gasped the moment it left her mouth. For a moment, Matt Damon froze. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't exaggerated. It was the quiet, stunned reaction of someone who had just realized the conversation he expected was not the conversation he was going to get. The usually calm, media-savvy actor leaned back slightly, inhaled slowly, and reassessed everything about the moment he found himself in. He attempted, once more, to respond respectfully. He tried to steer the discussion back to the topic he came for. But Joy pushed again, and again, and again, each time with more force, more intention, and less professionalism. Then it happened. The patience drained from Matt's expression. The warmth left his voice. The promotional smile faded into something stern, firm, and unmistakably serious. Matt placed both hands on the desk, leaned in slightly, and delivered the sentence that instantly silenced the entire studio. I came here to talk about something important, something I've worked on for years. But if this is the direction you want to take, then I think I'm done. The words hit like a hammer. Joy Behar laughed nervously, trying to recover. She attempted to soften her tone, rephrase the question, and pretend it wasn't meant to be provocative. But the damage was done. The audience wasn't buying it. The co-hosts weren't sure what to say, and Matt Damon was finished. He calmly reached down and unclipped his microphone, placing it neatly on the table. The camera crew scrambled, unsure whether to cut to commercial or keep rolling. Joy called after him, trying desperately to regain control of the situation. But Matt simply shook his head, said, "Have a good day," and walked off the set with the calm authority of someone who had made a clear decision about where to draw the line. The entire studio was left in stunned silence. Viewers at home were died, and Joy Behar, left alone at the desk, struggling to fill the heavy silence, was forced to explain a meltdown she had created with her own agenda. And in that moment, one thing became undeniable. When personal agendas collide with professional responsibility, the fallout can be immediate, public, and unforgettable. How do you sleep at night knowing you're out here telling ordinary people to make sacrifices while you live like a king? Joy Behar's voice sliced through the studio like a razor. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. A challenge, a direct strike delivered with the confidence of someone who believed she had the upper hand. Whoopi Goldberg immediately sensed danger. Her eyes widened slightly, and she leaned forward, hands raised in a quiet plea for calm. "Joy, maybe we should let Matt actually talk about the documentary itself," she suggested diplomatically, her tone grounded and soothing. Whoopi had been in the industry long enough to recognize when a conversation was veering off the rails, and this one was already skidding hard toward disaster. But Joy was just getting warmed up. She waved Whoopi off with a dismissive flick of her wrist, sharp, impatient, and almost theatrical. The gesture said everything. She wasn't finished, she wasn't backing down, and she definitely wasn't interested in softening the moment. "No," Joy declared, raising her voice as if she were addressing the entire nation. "I think this is exactly what we should be talking about." A tremor of righteous indignation vibrated in her tone. "I'm tired, absolutely tired, of celebrities coming on shows like this and lecturing regular people about how to live, while exempting themselves from the same standards. Matt, you made over $20 million last year alone. Tell me, how many solar panels could that money have bought?" Low-income families instead of funding another vanity project, the audience murmured, shocked by the bluntness of her attack. Some shifted in their seats. Others looked at Matt Damon, waiting to see how he would respond. Matt didn't snap back. He didn't roll his eyes or raise his voice. Instead, his jaw tightened ever so slightly, a subtle sign of irritation, maybe even hurt. But he kept his tone calm, controlled, and professional. "Joy," he began steadily, "I understand your frustration. I really do, and I think a lot of people share those concerns. But what you're doing right now is exactly the kind of divisive rhetoric that prevents us from having productive conversations about these issues." His words were clear, deliberate. The documentary highlights families from all economic backgrounds who are making real, tangible changes in their communities. That's the story I came here to talk about. Divisive rhetoric. Joy repeated the phrase slowly, as if savoring it. Then her voice shot up half an octave, her laugh, sharp and bitter, echoed through the studio. That's rich. That's really rich coming from someone who supported political candidates who have blocked environmental legislation for years. The temperature on the set rose instantly. You can't have it both ways, Matt, she continued, jabbing a finger toward him, as though presenting evidence in a courtroom. You can't claim to care about the planet while backing politicians who take money from oil companies. That's called hypocrisy, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend otherwise. The audience gasped again. Even the camera operators looked momentarily stunned, their lenses drifting slightly as they reacted before snapping back into focus. Matt inhaled deeply. He wasn't angry, not outwardly. But the tension in his shoulders, the way he pressed his lips together before speaking, revealed a man who had reached a limit he wasn't planning to cross. Joy, he said quietly, you're oversimplifying a very complex set of issues. Public policy isn't black and white. People support candidates for many reasons, and environmental policy is only one of them. But what we should be doing, right now, is discussing real solutions instead of attacking people. Personally, that's not helpful. It doesn't move the conversation forward. But Joy wasn't listening, not really. She wasn't looking for a conversation. She wanted a moment, a headline, a clip that would circulate online within minutes. So let me get this straight, she said sarcastically, leaning back in her chair with crossed arms. You want people at home to cut back on air conditioning, to buy electric cars they can't afford, to change their entire lifestyles, while you fly around the world on private jets making documentaries that tell them they're the problem. Whoopi winced. Sarah Haynes looked down at her cards. Sunny Hostin blinked in disbelief. The entire panel was uncomfortable. Everyone except Joy Behar, who was fully committed to her line of attack. Matt's expression hardened. He had walked onto the set expecting a real conversation, maybe even challenging questions. But this was something else entirely. A character assassination disguised as journalism. I've never told anyone they're the problem, he replied firmly. What I've said, and what the documentary shows, is that we all have a role to play, including corporations, governments, and yes, individuals. But you're twisting my words, Joy, and you're doing it intentionally. Oh, please, Joy scoffed. Spare me the polished PR speech. People are tired of being lectured by millionaires who don't live in the real world. And I'm tired. Matt shot back, his voice still calm but finally carrying a sharper edge, of people taking cheap shots instead of engaging in meaningful dialogue. You invited me here to talk about a film meant to inspire change. Instead, you're turning this into a political interrogation that has nothing to do with the work I've done or the communities represented in this documentary. The studio hushed again. Even Joy slowed down, just for a second, realizing she had provoked a different version of Matt Damon, one she wasn't used to seeing. But she didn't stop. Well, maybe if celebrities actually practiced what they preached. Matt held up a hand, a simple gesture, but a powerful one. Joy, he said, I came here in good faith. I came here to talk about something important. But if this is the direction you want to take, then I'm not going to participate in a conversation that's clearly designed to create conflict instead of understanding. His voice was steady. Final. Sarah Haynes shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her expression tightening with concern as the temperature of the conversation continued to rise. She glanced between Matt and Joy, like someone watching two cars speed toward each other with no intention of braking. Desperate to rescue the interview before it fully imploded on live television, she leaned forward and offered a fragile smile. Maybe, she said gently, we could talk about some of the specific solutions highlighted in the documentary. Her voice carried the hopeful tone of someone trying to throw a lifeline before the ship went under. But Joy wasn't reaching for any lifeline. She wasn't interested in pivoting, de-escalating, or even pretending to restore professionalism. She shot Sarah a look so sharp and cold it could have frozen fire mid-flame. Sarah, Joy snapped, her tone thick with irritation. I think our viewers deserve honesty, not some carefully crafted PR message. She didn't just disagree, she dismissed, shutting Sarah down with a single icy sentence. Then she turned back to Matt, eyes locked on him like a hawk ready to strike. Matt, yes or no, do you think your lifestyle choices align with the environmental message you're promoting? The studio fell so silent you could almost hear the breath Matt pulled in. He sat up straighter, shoulders tightening, his jaw set. He was clearly fighting to maintain composure, to keep the conversation respectful despite Joy's increasingly confrontational tone. "Joy," he began, voice steady but strained, "I think you're trying to reduce a very complex global issue to a simple gotcha moment, and that's not helpful for anyone." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Yes, I live a privileged life, and yes, I try to use that privilege responsibly. The documentary shows ordinary people making extraordinary changes, and that's what I want to focus on. There it is," Joy said triumphantly, stabbing the air with her finger like a prosecutor who had finally cornered a witness. "You admit you live a privileged life, but you won't admit that privilege comes with responsibility. You won't admit that maybe, just maybe, you should be doing more than making documentaries that make you feel good about yourself." Several audience members murmured, shifting in their seats. The ripple of discomfort moved through the studio like a nervous wave. People weren't just unsettled, they were beginning to turn on Joy. A few even shook their heads or whispered to each other, clearly unhappy with the aggressive tone. Alyssa Farah-Griffin, sensing the moment spiraling out of control, tried to jump in. She raised a hand gently and started, "If I could just ask Matt about the film's production process." But Joy cut her off before she could finish half a sentence. "I'm not done here," she declared sharply, and for the first time her voice carried an unmistakable edge of genuine anger, not just performative intensity, but real, personal heat. She practically leaned across the table toward Matt. "Matt, I want you to look into that camera," she pointed dramatically toward the audience, facing Lens, "and tell our viewers why they should listen to environmental advice from someone who probably burns more fossil fuels in a month than they do in a year." A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Even the cameraman flinched. This time, Matt's composure cracked, just slightly, but undeniably. His eyes narrowed with irritation. His shoulders tightened. The controlled warmth he had maintained up until now evaporated, replaced with something sharper, colder, more resolute. He turned to face Joy directly. "You know what, Joy," he said, voice low but vibrating with restrained frustration. "I came here in good faith. I came to talk about important work that highlights real solutions to climate change, solutions created by real people trying to make a difference." He leaned forward just slightly, meeting her gaze without flinching. "But instead of having a meaningful conversation, you've decided to turn this into some kind of personal attack. That's not journalism. That's just performance." The studio fell into a stunned silence. Even Whoopi, who had been trying to stay neutral, looked taken aback. Sarah blinked. Alyssa froze mid-breath. The audience seemed to collectively inhale and hold it. But Joy's eyes lit up. It was the exact reaction she had been mining for the emotional break, the moment she could spin as a victory. She straightened, chin lifting, as though she'd finally reached the point she'd been pushing Matt toward from the moment he sat down. "Performance," she repeated, her voice dripping with incredulous satisfaction. The smile that spread across her face wasn't friendly. It was the smile of someone who felt they had just won a battle. "Is that what you think this is?" Even the way she asked the question revealed her intention. It wasn't about dialogue, it was about escalation. Matt exhaled slowly, visibly wrestling with the tension in the room. He didn't want to give her any more fuel, but Joy had already decided that fuel wasn't something she needed permission to take. She wanted the clash, she wanted the moment, and she had it. Right there, live on air, under blinding studio lights, in front of millions watching at home, Joy Behar had successfully turned what was supposed to be an interview about environmental solutions into a public interrogation, a spectacle of accusation, ego, and hostility that had nothing to do with climate change and everything to do with conflict. The tension on set had reached a level that even seasoned television producers rarely witnessed. Joy Behar's voice cut through the studio like a serrated knife, each word carrying enough bite to make even the most confident guest guess themselves. Whoopi Goldberg, who had been attempting, unsuccessfully, to hold the show together, leaned forward with an expression that was equal parts disbelief and frustration. The entire interview was spiraling downward at lightning speed, and everyone, including the audience, could feel it. Joy's last jab hung in the air when Matt Damon finally spoke again. His tone remained controlled, but his eyes had hardened. "Joy, is there any part of you," he asked slowly, "that realizes how inappropriate this line of questioning is?" She didn't flinch. In fact, she looked energized, almost triumphant. "Inappropriate? Not at all." "What's inappropriate?" Joy said, leaning forward as though preparing for another strike, "is that celebrities like you pretend to be heroes of the environment while living lifestyles that contradict every message you claim to stand for." The comment sent a visible shockwave through the room. The audience murmured, the camera operators exchanged glances, and Sarah Haynes shifted in her seat, as if trying to make herself physically smaller. The air felt thick enough to cut, but Joy wasn't done. She rarely stopped once she sensed emotional blood in the water. "That's interesting coming from an actor," she continued, her smirk widening. "Tell me, Matt, be honest with us. Is your environmental activism just another role you're playing for the cameras? Another performance? Another way to craft a public image that makes you feel morally superior?" The accusation was ruthless, and for the first time since the interview began, Matt looked genuinely shaken. His brows drew together, his jaw clenched, and the professional calm he had been holding on to so tightly began to crumble at the edges. "Joy," he said, his voice low and sharp, "that is completely out of line." Whoopi let out a quiet, exasperated sigh and actually covered her face with her hand, a gesture usually reserved for moments of pure emotional embarrassment. But Joy was unmoved. The fire in her eyes hinted that she had been waiting for this exact explosion, baiting him with precision. Matt continued, now sounding far less like a celebrity trying to keep the peace, and more like a man tired of being publicly insulted. "You're questioning my sincerity about issues I've been involved in for over 15 years, he said. "Long before Hollywood cared, long before it was fashionable, I've dedicated real time, real effort, real money, and real advocacy to these problems. This isn't a hobby. This isn't a PR stunt, and it certainly isn't a performance." But Joy simply leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, a slow, satisfied smile forming on her face. She looked like someone who had just cornered her opponent in a chess match. "Oh, come on, Matt," she said dismissively. "What's truly insulting isn't me asking hard questions. What's insulting is watching wealthy celebrities like you preach to working families about their carbon footprint while living in mansions big enough to house 50 people. What's insulting is pretending that flying private jets is somehow acceptable because you've planted a few trees or filmed a documentary that makes you feel better." The audience let out a collective gasp. Even Alyssa Farrah Griffin attempted to salvage the moment. "I think we should talk about the film's actual production." Joy cut her off instantly, voice louder and sharper than before. "I'm not done here." It was the kind of on-air moment talk show producers dread, raw, chaotic, unpredictable, and impossible to walk back once spoken. Joy's voice now trembled with indignation, so intense it bordered on fury. "Matt," she continued, stabbing a finger toward the camera, "I want you to look straight into that lens and explain to our viewers why they should take advice about environmental responsibility from someone who burns more fossil fuel in a month than most of them do in an entire year." Matt's patience finally snapped. The mask of trained Hollywood calm slipped, revealing a flash of sheer frustration. "You know what, Joy," he said, turning to her with ice in his voice. "I came here in good faith to talk about actual solutions to climate change. Solutions created by real people in real communities. I came here to promote work I'm proud of. But instead of engaging in a meaningful discussion, you've turned this interview into a personal attack. That's not journalism, that's performance." Joy's eyes sparkled as if he had just confirmed everything she wanted. "Performance?" she echoed loudly. "That's rich. The actor accusing me of performing." Whoopi had finally reached her limit. Her voice came out firm and commanding, exactly the tone she used when she knew chaos had gone too far. "Joy, that's enough," she said, her expression stern. "This interview was supposed to be about Matt's documentary, not whatever personal vendetta you've decided to air on live television." Joy whipped her head toward Whoopi, and for a moment the entire studio froze. Even through the camera lenses, the tension was palpable. Personal vendetta. Whoopi. Since when is holding public figures accountable for their hypocrisy considered a personal vendetta? She demanded. This right here is the problem. This soft, gentle tiptoe around. The celebrity style of journalism is why they get to say whatever they want without consequences. Her voice reverberated across the set. The audience fell completely silent. Even Matt seemed stunned. For several seconds, no one spoke. It was the kind of silence that only happens when something truly, irreversibly explosive has taken place.